school. For girls, it is still complicated. If we look at conflict and fragile countries, so 1 in 3 girls still in developing countries marry before the age of 18. And we all know that when this happens, usually this also means that the girl will leave the school. So here again, the need to look comprehensively, not only at education as a sector, but really investing in quality education, as you were saying, and take a whole of society approach. So that's what we are starting doing, really, to try and include SRHR education, so education on sexual reproductive health and rights, but also working with boys and with parents who are often the cause of girls leaving out of school. Also in linkage with specific social norms related to SRHR education. And what we also want to do more is investing in teachers' trainings, teachers as role models and also as agents which can really contribute to change social norms for girls and boys. So the second area you mentioned, which really needs to be seen in linkage with the others, is violence. And there the EU really invested quite substantially, is still investing quite substantially, as you know, both in terms of reducing harmful practices, FGM and child marriage, and fighting sexual and gender-based violence through different means, grants. We work with NGOs, but also very much work with the UN, UNFPA, UNICEF, and UN Women. And there, beyond the specific programs on to fight FGM and child marriage, I would like again, I think, to single out the spotlight, because it is an unprecedented effort of 500 million euros to really make a push to eradicate violence against girls and women. And I think this is even more prominent and obvious now with the COVID context, where we really see this spike of domestic violence attacks. So we are looking at that together with the UN to see really how we can best target action, making sure that in a moment like this, we do try and make a difference for these women, ensure helplines, ensure victim support, but also increase awareness and engaging men in this. So that's quite prominent. And you mentioned a crucial area for the girls, which is the digital. And it is crucial for us all. And in these moments of periods of confinement, it becomes so much more obvious. So there, I looked into statistics, and it's interesting to see that 52% of the global female population is still not using internet. So more than half, compared to 42% of all men. And in Africa, 33% of men use the internet compared to 22.6% of women. At the same time, while almost everyone in the world, 97%, has access or lives within reach of a mobile cellular signal, an estimated 3.6 billion people remain offline, and with the majority, of course, being women in unconnected locations in the least developed countries. So really, I mean, we see that this digital divide is growing in some region, in sub-Saharan Africa, in the Arab states, in Asia-Pacific regions. This is something we want to really tackle. And we are investing on this, be it in partnership with the private sector, to increase opportunities for women in the digital economy. But also, as you said yourself, digital, it's a fantastic tool which can empower women, give girls really a voice, and also in terms of the political space, and at the same time it represents a big threat. So cyber harassment, hate speech, this is really rampant. And this is also something we need to work together on. One issue that I wanted to refer to as a positive case example is the program we have, the I Know platform, that we have together with IDEA, IPU, and the UN, to provide girls with resources and strategies for really women empowerment in leadership and political participation. And this is now a network covering 190 countries. I think this is the type of ideas that we could further develop together. And finally, health, just to inform you that we are about to launch a call for proposal of around 30 million euros that is really about promoting universal sexual and reproductive health and rights of vulnerable adolescents in Africa. So the focus is strengthening public and community health systems to better respond to the needs of vulnerable adolescents, including planning and provision of sexual education and SRHR information and services. So this is coming very, very shortly. Your third recommendation is about accountability for the commitments and an evidence-based policy, the need for data. Our gender action plan actually set very high standards on this. So the challenge, if you like, is to live up to our political commitments, which implies that we need to have gender analysis in each and every project and action we do develop, and sex disaggregated data for each and every action that we develop. So it is not fully 100% achieved, but we have been making leap forwards also thanks to the self-inflicted commitments that we that we gave to ourselves. And I would like to leave you with your last point, which was about leaving no one behind, because of course, I mean, these are all issues of common concern, but they just multiply when you look at intersectionality, at issues like girls in disability, or if you look at ethnicity and other issues. So I think that's where we really need also to continue to step up our effort going forward, being more focused. So thank you very much for your report.
Thank you very much for both of you, Sagri and Chiara. And I find that very interesting that I strongly believe all three agree upon what is at stake, what is working well, and where are the gaps, and how so to say, with measures we could close the gaps. I would like first to give also the opportunity now, before we open the question and answer session, to MEP Ms. Fitzgerald, who is not only the European Parliament member, but she is also member of the Child Rights Group of the European Parliament. Yes, we look forward to hear your comment or your question, Ms. Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Can I check that you're hearing me okay?
Yes, we do.
You do. Thank you very much. It's lovely to join with you all today, and I hope you're all keeping safe and well. We're in lockdown here in Dublin, but it's great to be able to join this forum and be part of it. I've been asked to give a response to the report, so a couple of thoughts before you go on to the Q&A. First of all, I really want to welcome the report, and I think the level, well done, Sagri and everybody involved. I mean, the level of detail in it is fantastic, and I think data is the first important medium that we have to have on this issue. We didn't have data before. We have even the comparative data now from 25 years ago. I was in Beijing when we made these commitments, and it's great to see the improvements. But what I would say is there is no room for complacency at all. And that's very clear from the report. The progress is uneven, and this is always the issue. How do you deal with the more marginalized, the more at risk, certain parts of the world where the risks are higher? How do we make sure that we help the girls and young adolescents in those areas as much as the places where there has been progress? As I was thinking about this morning and listening to the debate, I thought, I've talked about gender proofing for years. And I remember 25 years ago, nobody really understood it or what gender budgeting meant. I think now we're going to have to start talking about girl proofing. Because I think while we know the progress that has been made on gender generally, but there's still a lot to do. But even more to get the focus onto the girls, the young women, the young girls, I think it's still missing quite a lot in many places. And I think that I'm speaking as a European parliamentarian and as somebody who's been in national politics for 20 years. While gender and the debate on gender indeed has been accelerated in recent times, there was denial for quite a long period. There's an acceleration now, I believe, and a real opportunity, certainly before we had COVID-19. And I think there is a question that nobody really has mentioned to date, is what the impact of COVID-19 is going to be on investment, what it's going to be on travel, and so on. We're in very uncharted territory here. And there is clearly a gender dimension, but there's obviously a wider health dimension that's affecting all over the world. So that's an issue for now too. So I think girl proofing, and from a European Parliament point of view, what I'd want to say is that obviously we would want to be partners in this in the best way possible. We want to work to advance girls' rights and voices. And I think, let me make a few points in relation to this. I think the key will be to take account of this in the MFF, the multi-financial framework, particularly in the Rights and Values Programme, in Erasmus programs, in the European Solidarity Corps, and the new Neighbourhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument. So the question again is, how do you put this up the priority chain? How do you put it up the political chain? We could take any one of the areas identified in the report and say, how do we make sure that at a political level, these are higher priorities? And of course, this is what we have struggled with for years in gender. And there's still issues around it. Even within the Parliament, there's ongoing issues. I'm on the FAM committee and the Development Committee, and we will certainly be pushing this report. I'd like to see it debated in the Parliament, for example, when we get back to business. Make sure that, I think the first thing we have to do is make sure that this report is really understood and widely circulated, so that you then have, it actually is implemented in the different programs. It is in the budget. It is on people's minds when we're doing the new gender equality strategy for the European Union. A couple of other points before I finish, because you want the Q&A. I think leadership amongst young women and girls is critical. I brought in the voice of the child in the Irish Constitution. So this listening, I think it's more at this stage still, although I saw great participation in Nairobi, I have to say, at the conference of young men as well, and we need to see more of that. But I think, really ensuring that all of the places where decisions are made, that you have young women's representation there. We need to see more and more of that leadership opportunity and hearing the voices. And let's really, in terms of implementation, let's identify all of the places where they could be heard and are not being heard, and make those demands. And I think the same applies in relation to other areas as well. The last point I mentioned before I'll finish, and of course, there's so much food for thought in this report. You could take any one item and I'd probably make the same points. But I think the digital divide, in sophisticated countries where we think we've dealt with gender equality, we're seeing the gender divide, the digital gender divide. Now, how much more when you recall the statistics that Paolo has just given us in Africa and so on. So I'll leave it at that. But look, much food for thought. And the implementation plan is the absolute key point in relation to this. And thank you very much for doing the work and sharing it today.
Thank you so much also for sharing your reflections, and in particular your recommendations, which we have definitely heard. We are recording it as well. And in my wrap up, I will definitely raise 2-3 points of yours as well. And I have seen also in this regard similarities to the work that also the European Commission is already doing and would like to scale up and to, so to say, fine tune as well. However, finally, there is also the opportunity now that I can, so to say, ensure that the participants' voices are heard as well. So the first question that we have received is by a colleague from Mattel. And the question is going to both of you, to you, Sagri, as well as it goes also to Chiara. And